of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. These beautiful plantation homes reflect the fascinating history of our culture and cuisine, and I'd like to share this story with you. Why not join me and some of my friends as we visit the plantation homes of our state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Louisiana Gold and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
When Edgar Stern, a wealthy cotton broker, and his wife Edith, heir to the Sears fortune, built their Greek Revival mansion here in the city of New Orleans, their friends referred to it as a grand city estate. In furnishing the home, they spared absolutely nothing, from the finest in French and English antiques to the very best in Oriental carpeting. They surrounded their showplace with 23 fountains and 8 acres of impeccable gardens patterned after the most famous in the world. The Sterns were among the wealthiest families in New Orleans, but definitely the most generous. It is because of their generosity that today we have Newcomb College Nursery School and Dillard University. I'm Chef John Folse. Welcome to Longue Vue Gardens. The 8 beautiful acres of gardens surrounding Longview today bear testimony to Mrs. Stern's love of gardening and interest in horticulture. She was also very active in restoring historic public gardens in New Orleans. This curved patio stairway leads to the balcony overlooking the formal gardens. The dining room was Mrs. Stern's favorite in the home. Decorated in Chinese rice paper sketched with birds and flowers, this room also houses the finest collection of English creamware in New Orleans. Created by Joshua Wedgwood in 1765, today 5 of the original serving pieces used at Longview have been recreated at the Leeds Foundry in England for sale right here in the home. Isn't this a gorgeous piece? Mrs. Stern was an avid collector of needle-pointed tapestry, as we see here. Many of these are on permanent display, framed and hung throughout the home for all of us to see. The Sterns entertained often, and many of the pieces used by them are out for viewing, such as this German porcelain wine cooler with the bird design and these gorgeous lusterware dessert plates. The main hallway is accented by a large Anglo-Irish chandelier and winding staircase unlike any other in the city of New Orleans. But because there are no windows in this room, the Vue de Lyon wallpaper was chosen, giving a panoramic view of the old French city of Lyon, complete with scenes of everyday life along the old riverbank. It is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a must-see in this house. Here in the drawing room overlooking the Spanish court, lavish parties were held honoring the likes of John Kennedy, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Jack Benny. Special features included here are the Aubusson carpeting and this magnificent English mahogany break-front bookcase. It combines the style of both Chippendale and Hepplewhite. In addition to being a rare and valuable antique, it contains more of this creamware collection. Perhaps the finest piece in this room is the English chest of drawers, veneered in satinwood and mahogany dating back over 200 years. But my favorite piece is this walnut music box made in Switzerland. Just listen to the beautiful sound of this charming 100-year-old instrument. Adjacent to the main home is the Whim House. It was built as an escape from Mrs. Stern and contains this unique swinging hammock bed. Yes, truly Longview Gardens is a grand city estate. can you imagine living in a lifestyle like that in New Orleans at the turn of the century? It had to be just amazing. And, you know, I spent a lot of time at Longview, and if you think those scenes are beautiful, just wait about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to show you another look at some of the formal gardens on that beautiful estate. It's just astounding. And not only that, while I was there, I found a diary that Mrs. Stearns, the owner and builder of that house, had kept about entertaining while she had some of these great friends like the Kennedys and Roosevelt, just to name a few of those who would stop by every now and then, not even to mention General and Mamie Eisenhower that would stop. But she always mentioned things about cooking, and one of the most important facts that she wrote down that I'm going to remember as long as I live about cooking, she stated that the more important the guest, the simpler and more regional the cuisine. And I think that all of us, whether we're entertaining at home or whether we're professional chefs in the kitchen, we should remember that one thought: the more important the guest, the simpler and more regional the cuisine, because that's what they're going to love to eat anyway, isn't it? Well, some of the things that she cooked, I want to share two of those great dishes with you that she particularly liked. But guess who's going to be the guest in my kitchen today? One of my great friends, and at the same time, one of the masters of cooking in this country, Chef Paul Prudhomme from New Orleans, is going to come in and not only talk about Longview and plantations, but also about his own life in cooking. So that's going to be a great opportunity for all of us to listen to what he's got to say about cooking. Mrs. Stearns' favorite dish, and one that she loves to serve, is the two things that I'm going to cook for you today. If you look in this big, beautiful wooden bowl I have here, you're going to see a piece of meat. This is corned beef. Now, corned beef is a very traditional dish in New Orleans, obviously. Some say coming over here with the English, and when cooking corned beef, you always want to have some nice sticks of celery and carrot, cabbage, potatoes, of course, some pickling spices and cloves to give it a really nice taste. Here's some garlic cloves that we would always use in Louisiana, but also the smoked andouille sausage we normally put in the pot when we cooked corned beef here in the South. But talking about corned beef, where does the name come from? A lot of people think that obviously it was a dish cooked with corn, maybe. Well, hey, not so. Corned beef actually gets its name from the granules of salt that's used in water to make a brine to cure the beef. Normally it's made with brisket, maybe round sometimes, but a gallon of water, about 2 cups of a coarse granulated salt, which kind of resembled wheat in England, and wheat was called corn, so naturally they call it corned beef because of that salt, a little sugar and pickling spice. You keep the meat in that brine for about 4 or 5 weeks, turning it every now and then in the refrigerator, and then you have a really nice piece of corned beef. Of course, you can go to the store and get it. That's where most of us get it today. Now, how do we cook it? Well, I've got a little bit water here in my black iron pot. I'm going to take this piece of corned beef. It's about, well, I guess 3 or 4 pounds, and I'm going to put it right down into the water, and then I'm going to flavor it with all of these fresh ingredients. I'm going to put some of the nice sticks of celery. I'm going to put some carrot. And again, you know, I'm kind of like Mrs. Stearns, you know, just put whatever you want to into this pot. It's going to make it taste really good. Here's some garlic cloves from Louisiana. We want to throw those in there. And then the smoked andouille sausage. You know, I've told you before that andouille is actually the chopped meat. It's not ground. It's a sausage that we think of as almost a ham in a casing in Louisiana, but heavy smoke, nice flavor, and that's going to give the corned beef just a little bit extra flavor. Of course, you can put some nice basil or thyme, any herbs, but always pickling spice. These are all those nice sweet spices, cloves and all of that. So you want to throw some of that into the pot. And I would allow this to come to a rolling boil. Look how nice all of that looks already. I would let this come to a rolling boil and cook for about 3 hours until that corned beef is almost falling apart, but not quite. You don't want it falling apart in the pot. I have one already done, so I'm going to move this out of the way. And I want you to take a look into this next pot that I have right here. And you can see the corned beef sitting in there. I'm going to remove it so that I can make all of the other little accompaniments that go with it. Look how tender this is. I want you to take a look. This thing is going to almost, as I say, fall apart. It's not quite breaking in half, but it certainly could if I was to allow it to do so. And I'm going to keep the stock. That's the most important thing. You want to keep all of this wonderful stock because remember the flavors that went into it. Once I take the beef out, of course, I would strain all of those that's cooked away, and I can add some new fresh ingredients, as you see here, right down into that stock, and put the things that's going to take longest to cook in first. Obviously, I'm going to have cabbage and potatoes, but you'd want to put in the potatoes and carrots first because they're going to take a little bit longer to cook. And once they're done, go ahead and add a couple of these big wedges of cabbage and let them cook for about, 10, 15 minutes just to poach nicely. And I think you have the general idea, but I have one that's already been poached, and I have it set up here to show you how we set up a platter of corned beef. Just take a look at this just so we can look at the vegetables a little bit. Here's the poached cabbage. As you can see, the potatoes are nice and tender. And here's the smoked andouille. We're going to serve them on the plate as well. I'm going to take the corned beef and slide it right down in the center. You can see how nice that is. And, of course, you can break it. Look how tender this is. I mean, I can just pull it apart if I wanted to into serving pieces. But I always want to come right across the top with a little of that nice hot stock. Look at this, and it's going to steam with all that beautiful flavor that went into the pot as we poached the corned beef. Isn't that really, really nice? And I can garnish it again with a little touch of different kind of colors. I can put some of this red on top of it. I can put some diced carrots, any of these pretty flavors and colors. And that's the way Mrs. Stearns would have done this corned beef for herself, because this was her favorite dish, as she said in her diary. So there it is, corned beef, very simple to do. And, of course, it's a dish that you can make well ahead of time. It's not something that you have to slave over for a couple of hours right before guests are coming. Cook it a day ahead of time and then reheat it in that nice stock pot. It's going to be just great. Well, remember what I said about her really liking to cook a very simple regional dish for her most important guest. Well, Dwight Eisenhower and his wife loved her gumbo, and she would always cook a shrimp, crab, and okra gumbo, and that's what I want to show you. I want to share with you her favorite recipe for that particular dish. Let's take a look at this platter, because on this platter is everything Mrs. Stearns would have used for that gumbo. Now, of course, here's the okra, brought to Louisiana by the Africans many years ago, and in fact called guinea gumbo or gumbo, as they called it. Here we have some slices of it. Many people put sliced okra raw, just like this, into a gumbo. You can also buy the okra canned. You see, we have the nice canned okra. It's kind of poached and most of it ready to go into the pot. But I like to take fresh okra and saute it in a little oil with about a tablespoon of vinegar and saute it as most Louisiana cooks would, or as we call smothered okra here in the South. And that's going to go into the roux. And, of course, the jumbo lump crab you see here on the platter, shrimp, beautiful big old shrimp here, and tomatoes. So let's go ahead and into my little pot here. I have some brown roux. You can see it's already cooking here. And this is equal parts of oil and flour, and we just get it to whatever degree of brown we would like. Of course, this is a nice brown roux. I'm going to put into that some onions, and let me kick that fire real high here. I'm going to put some onions into it, celery, a touch of bell pepper, and, of course, the okra itself. I'm going to put that smothered okra right down into my roux because I want to start all of that cooking away. You can hear that sizzle down in there. Of course, tomatoes. I'm going to drop some tomatoes. She always liked to put not only fresh tomatoes, but she would also add a touch of tomato sauce if the season wasn't right and the tomatoes weren't quite ripe enough. But she would always add just a little touch of tomato sauce. And then into that, of course, once all of this sautés, I could go ahead and add a little bit, just a touch, of the crab meat. I don't want to put too much. And, of course, some of the big shrimp. And I'm keeping the tails on the shrimp to give it that really nice presentation. Once this cooks for just a minute or so, so all of those great flavors come together, I can add a touch of garlic down into it, as I always like to do, a touch of that Louisiana hot sauce, because you want to give it a little bit spice in her gumbo. And then, of course, I could add stock. Water, chicken stock, shrimp stock, crab stock, whatever. We've talked about stocks before. I'm going to add about a quart or so of stock to this roux, and I'll just stir it around like this. And you can see how that okra gumbo would come together. I would allow this to cook for about 30 minutes for all those flavors to develop. And then right at the end, I would add more of these big, beautiful 21, 25 count shrimp, and of course, some more crab. But that's how we would finish it. And I've got a big bowl of this, a big terrine already done right over there that Paul and I are going to eat in just a second. So I'll let this sit here and cook a little bit, and we'll taste that later. Another couple dishes that Mrs. Stern always served at the plantation, well, here was her Rockefeller that was always stuffed in artichoke bottoms. Look how pretty this is. This is a great appetizer as well as a little hors d'oeuvre that you could serve at parties. And her famous dish that was always served out in those beautiful gardens at Longview, this is a poached pecan and chicken salad. You can see how beautiful all of those colors are in that salad. Just really, really nice. Okay, before my good friend Paul comes out, I want you to take a look at the gardens and fountains of Longview. Immediately upon entering the gates at Longview, there's plenty in bloom to see, like this gorgeous sky vine. Each of the 7 formal gardens are accented by one of the fountains that have made Longview famous. Here in the Pan Garden is a plaque commemorating one of the 3 women responsible for designing these gardens. Ellen Biddle Shipman not only worked here, but also on New York's Botanical Gardens. Here is the beautiful pond garden, and this narrow canal garden was inspired by a patio in Portugal. This wall garden features a terrace fountain surrounded by rose bushes of many varieties. Here is Mrs. Stern's favorite, the yellow garden. She designed it herself using plants with yellow flowers and foliage, such as this beautiful butterfly vine. In the nursery area, a staff of 8 gardeners are busy year-round. This wall of flowering vines is certainly attractive to the many hummingbirds that come to feed here. However, they must remember to share the garden with an occasional bumblebee. My favorite garden on the property is the Wild Garden, designed by the Louisiana naturalist Carolyn Dorman. It features plants native to Louisiana, including this unique chocolate plant. The focal point of this garden is a pond and pigeonniere designed after one at Uncle Sam's plantation near Convent. Uncle Sam was the largest plantation home on the river. This garden also features many varieties of camellia bushes that bloom throughout the winter months. Here in the old Spanish court garden, patterned after the Henrique Gardens in the Alhambra in Spain, you'll find this white marble fountain dating back to the very early 1500s. It's the oldest fountain on the property. The garden is further enhanced by boxwood hedges and a walkway of black and white pebble mosaic patterned after a street in Barcelona, Spain. The gardens and fountains of Longview are unequaled by any that I know of in the South. Well, while you were looking at those great shots of the garden, my friend Paul came out and I served us each a bowl of gumbo. Welcome, Paul. How you doing?
It's great to be with you, John. Oh, this gumbo smells wonderful.
Isn't it? This is Mrs. Stern's favorite. She served it to all of her best friends, and hey, I serve it to you.
Thank you, thank you.
And I'm going to put a little, there you go, a little touch of hot sauce.
A little hot sauce and a little sassafras, a little gumbo filet powder.
Little filet powder. There you go. How you been?
Oh, is that great?
Been okay?
It smells wonderful.
Paul, everybody in the world knows what a great chef you are, and I'm sure many people are interested in where did you get your start? Where did it all begin?
Well, I started with my mother when I was a kid, and I was just fascinated with cooking ever since I can remember, because when the food was exceptionally good, the sound of the family eating was much, much better. I mean, we got louder and we had more fun, and I mean, the dishes went quicker, and the thing that was the best on the table always went first, and I would help her cook. And she would stand me in the wood burning, in the wood box next to the wood burning stove, and I stirred the pots and stuff. And the smells that came out were just spectacular, and it made you feel good. It was emotional. And so I started out real young, understanding that food could change if you did it right, and you could make it better just by what you did to it. And so it's been an exciting life for me.
Well, you know, Paul, we basically started the same way. I started cooking at a very early age as well. I got my start in the kitchen at the apron strings of a mother and a good cook. What do you feel is the difference, though, between the area that I grew up in, the River Road of Louisiana, Bayou Country, and the prairie region of Opelousas, where you came from, the differences in the ingredients in food?
Well, like you had mostly fish. Probably the people, I tell people there's two kinds of Cajuns, and one is the farming and the other is the fishing. And the fishing Cajuns, probably 80% or roughly that of that diet was some kind of seafood. Where our diet, I lived on a farm and on a plantation, and we had 80% of our food was meat. We had rabbits and we had ducks and guineas and turtle and all those kind of things that was wild. But also we had pork and beef, and so we had the whole round of meat. Yet we had finfish, but once a year we'd have shrimp, once a year we'd have oysters, and so. But fish was the main part. I mean, seafood was the main part of your diet, and meat was the main part of mine.
Well, now you had a very interesting upbringing because you were brought up on a sharecropper's plantation. You shared a piece of a plantation with someone else, unlike Longview, I'm sure. What kind of deal is that in sharecropping?
I'm sure you the house wasn't anything like Longview, and our gardens were the fields where you worked in the barnyards. You know? But we were sharecroppers, and we worked in what's called a third. And that means that the landlord got a third for furnishing the land, the housing, and furnishing us the grain. Now, the rest of it, we furnished, the manpower, and everything we did, everything we planted, everything we raised, we would bring one-third. We'd have like 3 sacks of corn. 1 sack would go to the landlord, 2 would be for us. We'd have 3 bales of cotton. 1 would be for the landlord. Corn, we would take wagon loads to the landlord. I mean, see, everything we harvest, 1/3 of it belonged to the landlord, and so it was a way we lived, and it was a good way to live. It was a cheap way to live because we had all our own food, but it was also a hard life.
In cooking, when we think about plantation cooks, we think of the great influence that they had in our region down on the river. What do you think is the greatest influence of the plantation cooks on the food that we cook in Louisiana today?
You know, most pictures we see, or most information we have on plantations, especially the big homes, we always see the portray of a black woman cooking or a black woman and man cooking. And it was certainly a lot of that on the plantations. But also they had many nationalities cooking. The Italians were a part of that. The French were a part of that. And so all these mixtures of people that handle the kitchen would turn or add to each one of the ingredients and make a pot of food just a little bit different, make the jambalaya a little bit different, make the gumbos a little bit different. So as these developed over years and years of time, we got our culture and our food in our culture.
Just as this gumbo is so different from 1 mile down the road to another, depending on what the family cooked it.
And really different. You know, my first taste was a surprise because this is a typical New Orleans gumbo that's thicker, and it has wonderful flavors, but in the country, we always did thinner gumbos.
Paul, everybody associates the name black and redfish to Paul Prudhomme. It's certainly one of the things that you're best known for, but what do you think is your greatest contribution to cooking in America?
I like to think that what I did, what I was fortunate enough to participate in, is awakening America to her regional foods and letting the young people know that in every area of the country there's great food if you just handle it properly. For instance, our food, if we would have taken etouffee and served it the way we did at home, we'd cook a pot and the family would sit down and eat, and the pot of food was gone. If we'd cook that same pot in a restaurant and serve it all night, it wouldn't be very good. So you have to change the way the food is produced, but you have great regional food all over the United States, and we're seeing that. And to me, to discover that and to help people discover it was a wonderful part of my career.
I think the fact that you probably threw the spotlight, exactly as you're saying, on Louisiana cuisine certainly inspired a lot of chefs all over the country as well as the world to look much, much closer at their own region. And I think today a lot of the excitement in American cooking is because of you. And Paul, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing a bowl of gumbo. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, John. My pleasure.
And y'all come back again as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana. We're going to eat gumbo.
We love you, Louisiana.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Chef John Folse's Plantation Celebrations, Recipes from Our Louisiana Mansions, is a full-color 335-page book containing food history, recipes, and over 150 photographs from these southern landmarks. For your copy, send a check or money order for $28.50 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Or use your credit card by calling toll-free 1-800-973-7246.